That's right. Yeah.
Hello everyone, welcome. Welcome to the 6th lecture of our second issue of the Bulletin of Near Eastern Excavations and Research. I am Valentina Santini, as you may know, and I will moderate the encounter. As you probably know, if you attended our previous lectures, the Bulletin is focused on current archaeological excavations and projects in the Near East, and is intended for scholars, university students, but also the wider public. And at the end of each lecture, there's a section dedicated to discussion. Therefore, if you have questions, you can use the live chat of YouTube, which is here in this page. And at the end of the presentation, I'm going to read your questions or your comments to our speaker. And today's speaker is Glenn Schwartz from Johns Hopkins University, who will discuss investigating a 2nd millennium BC North Mesopotamian city, excavations at Kurd Qaburstan, Kurdistan, Iraq. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Valentina, for your introduction. And I'd like, of course, to thank Stefano Valentini and Guido Guarducci for the invitation to speak to you today. It's a pleasure to do it. I've been completely immersed in working on the publications of my previous excavations in Syria, and I haven't really been thinking about my more recent project lately. So it's a nice opportunity to revisit that. Of course, I wish that it's a pleasure to talk to you all. I wish, of course, that I could actually be in Florence, but maybe sometime in the not too distant future, such things will be possible again. Let us hope. So, as some of you may know, I for the most of my archaeological career, I was working in Syria on different sites, most recently the site Tel el-Mara. But with the advent of the Syrian civil war in 2011, that became impossible. So I was then faced with the question, what do I do? Should I start a new project somewhere else? Or should I concentrate on publishing the results of the projects that I've already been involved in Syria? It's sort of a well-known archaeological sin that it's more fun to dig than it is to actually write up your results. So an argument could be made that the responsible thing to do would have been to simply buckle down and produce the publications, the final publications of my work in Syria. On the other hand, I felt that I wasn't really ready to quit field work. You know, I sort of felt I've been doing it for a long time, and I felt like I'm kind of learning how to do it. I'm getting better at it, and why quit now? So I decided to go ahead and try to start a new project, but also to try to work on my publications too. So maybe it's a kind of, you know, trying to have my cake and eat it too, but I have been trying to do both. So, as you know, I ended up focusing on work in Iraqi Kurdistan, so the Kurdistan region of the Republic of Iraq. You know, when I tell my friends, well, I'm not working in Syria anymore, instead I've moved to Iraq, and then they laugh. It's like, oh, Syria, it wasn't dangerous enough in Syria, so you had to find another place. But in fact, Kurdistan is relatively secure, certainly compared to the rest of Iraq, is welcoming to foreign archaeologists, which of course is very important, and has become a kind of archaeological refuge for people who can't work in Syria anymore or in other regions. So there's, in the past, I don't know, 10 years or so, there's been a kind of gold rush, archaeological gold rush to Kurdistan. And I joined the rush. Not only is it welcoming, of course, to foreign archaeologists, but it's archaeologically rich, as exemplified by the famous tell a mound at Erbil, the Erbil citadel, with the 19th century and early 20th century architecture on top of it now, but a very ancient mound. So I was alerted to the possibility of an interesting site on the plain of Erbil called Kurd Qaburstan. And I'm grateful to my colleague, Jason at Harvard University for cluing me in to this possibility. So just to say a few things about this region before I start talking about the site. So here's Erbil, the modern capital of the Kurdistan region, and it has been a major center all the way back until the third millennium, at least. So the Erbil Plain is one of the major rainfall farming zones of northern Mesopotamia between the upper Zab and the lower Zab here. In the period of the Assyrian Empire, Erbil itself was a major city and a cult center. And, Ashur, the original capital of Assyria, is just off the map around here. And Nineveh, Nimrud, they're just to the west of our region. So 300 to 400 millimeters of rain per year. So a prosperous agricultural regime is possible. And this has been a major population center throughout history. But archaeologically, it has been relatively underexplored. There has been work done in Erbil itself, and recently, new projects have begun, but not much work was done before, let's say, 2005, I think. Because in the period of Saddam Hussein, of course, there was a lot of turbulence going on in the Kurdistan region, and the Iraqi government didn't want foreign archaeologists spending time there. So it's one of the exciting things about this region is a kind of archaeological frontier, while at the same time clearly was an important region in the on the Mesopotamian plain. So Kurd Qaburstan itself became apparent to Jason Orr when studying the corona images, and here you see the corona image. And so it seemed that there was a city wall enclosing a large area of over 100 hectares. So if this was a correct evaluation, this would be one of the largest sites on the Erbil Plain. When Jason Orr did his survey, or I think it was in 2012, he collected pottery, he and his team collected pottery from the surface of the site, and they concluded that the Middle Bronze Age, the early second millennium, was the most important, that it had yielded the largest number of sherds, and that therefore it was the main period of occupation. They also noted that the late Bronze Age, in the middle to later second millennium, also yielded a large number of sherds. So it's a multi-period site. There are many periods, but one could conclude that the Middle Bronze was the main period and the Late Bronze was also very important. Having concluded preliminarily that the Middle Bronze was an important period at this site, perhaps the most important period, Jason Orr made the suggestion that Kurd Qaburstan could be identified as the ancient Qabra. So what is Qabra? Qabra is mainly known from two monumental stelas, stone stelas. One is a stela that's attributed to Shamshi-Adad that's now in the Louvre. And it commemorates a victory over the king of Qabra. And it dates to the Middle Bronze Age, probably around 1800 BC, and of course in the period of Shamshi-Adad, who established a kind of empire over northern Mesopotamia and Syria. Then the other monument was discovered at Tel Asmar, ancient Eshnunna, which is a stela attributed to it is a work of the king Dadusha of Eshnunna, and it commemorates his victory over Qabra. And you see here the walls of Qabra and the battle and the disembodied heads of the defeated enemies being pecked at by vultures. This is an unusual monument in that the text refers to the work of art itself, and it describes what's on the work of art. Interestingly, the description and the actual depictions are not that easy to reconcile. But anyway, what seems to have happened was that Shamshi Adad and Dadusha both collaborated in order to defeat and overwhelm and conquer this important city, Qabra, on the Erbil Plain. And it was apparently the dominant city of the Middle Bronze Age on the Erbil Plain. So it made sense for Jason Orr to suggest that Kurd Qaburstan, being a very large Middle Bronze center, according to his results, would have been ancient Qabra. So all this sounded very interesting to me, so I happily was able to acquire a permit to do field work at Kurd Qaburstan in 2013. And so I'd like to tell you some of what we tried to do, what we have done, and maybe where we can go from here. So beginning with the site itself, I would now estimate that the site occupies 109 hectares, that there is a clear, what looks like a clear city wall on the edge, and that there's a high mound occupying about 11 hectares and something like 17 meters high, and then a very low mound, something like 3 meters high, that occupies 98 hectares, part of which is covered by a modern village. And part of the high mound is covered by a modern cemetery, which accounts for the name of the site. Qaburstan means cemetery, so it's the cemetery of the Kurds. So here's a view. I'm standing on the lower town and looking at the high mound and the cemetery you see here. And here's another view from springtime. It was quite remarkable how green the landscape got compared to the summer, which is what I was used to. So here I was presented with a very large, apparently second millennium site, but also a site with other periods of occupation. And what to do, how could I plan a project at a site like that, given it's a very large site, but given the limited resources of a 21st century budget, shall we say, and also using 21st century methods. So there were several research issues that I could come up with. First is just the exploration of North Mesopotamian urbanism in the second millennium. So you're looking at this map, which is from a Metropolitan Museum catalog of an exhibition. As you see, there are all these urban centers in southern Mesopotamia and a fair number in Syria as well, but we don't know that much about northern Iraq and as a heartland of cities. We know southern Mesopotamia is famous for its urbanism and for its, as the heartland of cities, as Adams put it. But with the exception of the Neo-Assyrian capitals and a few other exceptions, we know relatively little, especially about, say, second millennium urbanism in northern Mesopotamia. So it's a research frontier, really, to learn about what a northern Mesopotamian city might be like. Then some of our colleagues who have done work in second millennium urban centers in Syria, in northern Iraq, like Tel Eilan and Tel Rima, have noticed that when they dug, they encountered palaces, they encountered temples but hardly ever encountered regular and ordinary houses. And so the idea of a hollow cities of the Middle Bronze Age has emerged. The idea that say after after a period of urban collapse or decentralization at the end of the late third millennium, in the Middle Bronze Age, the new authorities wanted to reestablish, a kind of political situation that had existed before. And also, in doing that, to reestablish the kinds of cities that had existed before the urban collapse. So they reestablished cities in northern Mesopotamia, but they didn't have the population to actually inhabit them and on a large scale. So hence this idea that they may have been hollow. They're large, but only containing administrative buildings or cultic buildings. Then Elizabeth Stone and Paul Zemansky, working in southern Mesopotamia, proposed that the urban situation there could be understood as hierarchical, rather than a single political authority that there were, or economic authority, that there were several competing, coexisting authorities. And this could be observable in the spatial layout of cities in the second millennium, where the temples would be in one location, the palaces would be in another, separated from one another, rather than, say, a monopoly of power. So that would be another model to try to test at a site like Kurd Qaburstan. Is this visible in northern Mesopotamia? And finally, how does urbanization in Mesopotamia in the second millennium compare to urbanization in the third millennium, when in its original, its first fluorescence? So if there is an urban kind of collapse at the end of the third millennium, you could call these second millennium cities as examples of second generation urbanism. So I was interested in seeing how could that second generation urbanism compare to the first generation. And I already had done some work on this before, and in this book that I co-edited called After Collapse, the Regeneration of Complex Societies. So it seemed an appropriate subject for me. Okay, so bearing all that in mind, what could we actually do at the site? We've had 3 excavations so far, partly inhibited by the various political problems that the region has experienced. So the appearance of the Islamic State, of course, that really caused problems. We couldn't have a 2015 or 2016 season. And then, of course, COVID more recently has been a problem, but we persevere. So I came up with 3 sort of major goals to aim at. First of all, it's a big site. What do? To sample different parts of the site, to determine their character and occupation history in order to guide future excavation. To test the hypothesis that it was a major early second millennium city, or an even Qabra. And then in such a big site, you can't just do excavation and get a good idea of what's going on. So to conduct geophysical survey as well. So let me share with you some of the results that we have achieved. When you start digging on the high mound, you immediately encounter late Bronze Age occupation. And so we discovered that this was one of the major, probably the second major occupation to deal with. So let me discuss that first. We excavated several areas on the high mound. So on the high mound east was probably our major location. And here he discovered 3 phases. Judging from the pottery and other evidence, it dates to the early late Bronze period. So presumably the period of the Mittani kingdom, something like 1500 to 1300 BC. And I'm going to talk about that more in a bit. So you go below the surface and immediately you hit the latest phase, which is our phase 1, sort of fragmentary mud brick architecture, and also graves. So graves with diagnostic Mittani period material culture, like these younger Khaborware painted chalices. This is a child burial here with a vessel right next to the head. Or another burial with a glazed bowl and these fist-headed bone pins. I love these little fists here. And a foreign, I presume a foreign import, a so-called Kassite goblet. So evidence of southern Mesopotamian contact up here in the north. Then in the next phase down, our phase 2, you get more coherent architecture of some relatively small scale, so I assume it's domestic architecture. And here, as in most of the architecture that we've excavated from the second millennium, there's a lot of drainage infrastructure. So baked brick and ceramic drains. So I guess the rather significant rainfall they got during the winter, they had to divert this off the mound. And they were also just interested in water management in general. We discovered from analysis of the bones, the animal bones, in one of the areas of this zone, that there was all sorts of evidence of manufacturing of bone implements, especially bone pins, and we found several complete examples of bone pins as well. So that's something that we might not have expected. Confirming of the Mittani identification is material culture like this Mittani common style cylinder seal. Then the third phase down, phase 3, the architecture gets more substantial. The walls are thicker, and there are more sophisticated, shall we say, features. So these mud brick features, including this, which I identify as a bath. Perhaps this is a seat for a person using the bath. And as you see, the drain leading next to the bath. And here we are in the bath. And then just outside the bath is what I interpret as a toilet, you see, with a covered drain next to it. It might seem a little odd to have your toilet situated, you know, at a drain which is going to lead right next to your bath. Perhaps they scheduled it so people were not using the toilet when somebody was taking a bath. But in any case, these are relatively elite features to encounter. So that and the thickness of the walls leads me to suspect that this is an elite residential sector, as we see here. And in fact, so the bath we were looking at is here, and there's another baked brick pavement here, and also with these vertical baked bricks marking its edge. So I think it's yet another bath over here. Now, so we were here on the High Mound East. Moving to the High Mound North, we have other evidence of late bronze architecture. So you go right underneath the surface, and you find these strange collections of baked bricks and pottery. At first, we thought they might be the signals of burials underneath, but there were no burial pits below them. Catherine Burge, who was the excavator, referred to it as bricolage. I like that term. There was, however, one burial, which was around here, actually, and it was kind of interesting. It contained disarticulated remains of a human, adult, and child here, and disarticulated remains of adult and young animals, sheep and goat here, plus one jar. And in the next to the humans were these large clay figurines. You could even call them statuettes. They're not life-size, but they're, I don't know, 20 to 30 centimeters high. So here you have one of them, obviously a female clay figurine with two life-size, toggle pins on it. So I guess that it was wearing some kind of textile originally. Now, that from in the third millennium, it's normal for women especially, but actually both sexes, to wear crisscross toggle pins to keep their clothing in place. But I'm not aware of your burial figurines in burials where you have this situation, or these very large figurines in burials. So I'm still struggling with how to interpret this. And in fact, there were 4 of them. So I think this is probably the 2 large ones, 1 female, probably 1 large male, and then another small male. And this looks like a male also. Now, one thing we've learned from our fieldwork is that there's no evidence of late bronze on the lower town. So it seems to be restricted to the high mound. Now, turning to the pottery and the chronology, if you know about Mittani period Mesopotamia, you immediately think of newsyware. But strangely, although we've excavated thousands of sherds, we only found 2 newsyware sherds, and here they are. Plus other examples of painted vessels that are not newsyware but have similar motifs on them. So why so few? Possibly because newsyware is usually associated with with elite contexts, and we don't have that many elite contexts. But I would have thought our phase 3 seemed rather elite. Another possibility is chronological, that newsyware may not begin until sort of midway in the late bronze period, and we may have very early LB. The quantitative analysis of our LB pottery showed that the assemblage was relatively homogeneous, but there were 2 types, at least, that start relatively in small numbers and then get steadily more common. And that's these very diagnostic shapes of the LB in Mesopotamia, these shallow, simple rim bowls, or even plates, you might call them in this case, and also these carinated bowls. They in the earliest phase, they're not as common, and then they get steadily more common. This is on the high mound east. The infrequency of newsyware, and also the relative abundance of this type, the black burnished white paste inlay ware, which is often thought to be early Mittani, led us to suspect that what we have is early LB. And looking at our carbon-14 dates, there are 8 carbon-14 dates. You see that the phase 3, the earliest phase, the dates are all in the late 16th century. So even like ostensibly before the appearance of Mittani control in the Erbil region. So I suspect, in fact, that we have pre-Mittani occupation and then early Mittani. This late 16th century date may also perhaps be taken as a support for the middle chronology, that we have LB pottery, but in the 16th century. These are all like indications of what the LB is like at Kurd Qaburstan. And let me just conclude this discussion of the LB by saying that Mittani evidence, or LB evidence in general, is rare on the Erbil Plain. So all the stuff we're learning is new, and I find it very exciting that we're filling in the blanks about what is the LB like, the early LB like on the Erbil Plain. We're getting a lot of Middle Assyrian, so late LB evidence from the site of Kasashemamuk and also Bashtepe. So we're filling in these blanks slowly but surely. Now, turning to the Middle Bronze Age, which is, according to Jason Orr, the main period of occupation at the site. What do we find here? So we start on the high mound, Now, it's not that easy to get to the Middle Bronze on the high mound because the Late Bronze is often on top of it. So we did manage to find two areas where the Middle Bronze was relatively accessible. So one is on the south slope of the high mound. And here we have sort of small scale or like sort of what looks like ordinary residential architecture. Here's the corner of the mud brick walls and a little baked brick surface and a vat you see in the pottery in situ. Some more examples of this Middle Bronze Age architecture. Confirming that this is really Middle Bronze. This is an Old Babylonian seal impression with a supplicating goddess and then a ascending god, probably the sun god. His you can see his knees, maybe you can, his knees he's like climbing up a mountain. And this is the same seal rolled over here. In this type of seal, very often there's an inscription in the space in between, but unfortunately we were not lucky in that way. Also interesting in this residential area is the frequency of these objects of synthetic basalt, which have been identified in southern Mesopotamia in this period. And so it's ceramic slag that's manufactured in shapes that are replicating what basalt is usually used for elsewhere. So grinding stones and irons, etc. So it's interesting that both now in northern Mesopotamia as well as in southern, you have the appearance of this kind of material culture, this medium of the synthetic basalt. Now also on the high mound, we move up here to the north slope, where we had late bronze on the top, but a relatively thin layer. And then underneath that, we're digging on the slope here, as you see, in a step trench. And we found evidence of a thick wall on the slope. So a kind of enclosure wall for the high mound dating to the Middle Bronze Age. And maybe this is a tower up here protruding upwards. And above the preserved brickwork was all sorts of burned debris that included what looked like collapse from a ceiling. And then farther up the slope, inside the enclosure wall, was more thick-walled architecture. So there's some kind of substantial building here, as we see, with the enclosure wall on the edge, the tower up here, and then these thick-walled architecture inside it, and another view of that. So that confirms that in the Middle Bronze Age, there's a wall around the high mound, and that there's some kind of substantial architecture inside it at this point. Now, on the lower town, which according to the surface survey results, had Middle Bronze occupation all over the place, this seems to be confirmed by our excavations, as well as by our own surface collection. So it does seem, wherever we've dug, that there is Middle Bronze present on the lower town. So the lower town north at this excavation, when we go underneath the surface, the present day surface, we find all sorts of lots and lots of pottery in situ that can be reconstructed into complete vessels. It's not a burned layer, but clearly it was a layer that people abandoned without, I assume abruptly, without taking their pottery with them. So we got a nice sample of Middle Bronze storage vessels and other kinds of vessels from this locus. And sometimes these interesting kind of fancy vessels as well. Now, one problem working in this area was we found all this pottery, but where was the architecture? It wasn't until we got down to what must be the floor that you could just barely see evidence of mud brick walls. So there's a room here and another room here and a wall there. But it was very difficult, or it was really impossible to see the mud brick architecture until we got all the way down to the floor. This is a dilemma a predicament that we also encountered when we sunk trenches on the edges of the site, hoping to find the city wall and hoping to identify its date. So here's one of these city wall trenches. And here we're digging, looking for the city wall, looking for associated architecture, associated material culture. There is an oven here that you see, this round thing. But as in the lower town north, there was a problem. If you look at the edge of the trench, you do not see any architecture, you don't see any stratigraphy, there are no floors, there's no organic material, there's no mud brick. All you see is this homogeneous red-brown soil. So we have, so it clearly, at first I was thinking maybe there's nothing here, maybe it's virgin soil, but there were Middle Bronze sherds, there was baked brick, there were brick features. So it was not virgin soil. And here you see a Middle Bronze vessel embedded in this hard red-brown homogeneous matrix. So we proposed that there's something strange about the geomorphology of the lower town, that the mud brick architecture must have somehow congealed with the soil around it due to the peculiar geological circumstances, to a point where you can't see the mud bricks now. But what we did see was, this is an area in the inner part of the trench where we found Middle Bronze pottery, where we found mud brick features, where we found an oven. And this part of the trench, there was nothing. So we proposed that this is where the city wall was, but you can't see it because it's all just homogeneous now. And this is, strata inside the city wall. Now, I admit that this, it's based on a modicum of evidence, but let's keep this in mind, and we'll review some other relevant evidence in a bit. So here's another trench we excavated in the lower town northeast, where we thought, according to geophysical evidence, there ought to be a large building. So again, you get, here's a baked brick threshold with a door socket, but no evidence of no evidence of mud brick, no evidence of sun-dried mud brick. And again, this homogeneous material. And there's evidence of a floor by sherds lying flat on a surface, but that's all we could determine. So it was the same kind of frustrating situation in the lower town, but again, uniformly Middle Bronze material culture. We dug a sounding to virgin soil, which is about 3 meters below the present day surface, and all the pottery above virgin soil was only Middle Bronze age. So if we can take that as representative of the lower town, which of course we should be careful about doing, but if we can use that as a hint, we might conclude that the entire lower town was occupied in the Middle Bronze Age and founded in the Middle Bronze Age, and that the city wall likewise was a Middle Bronze feature and founded in that period. Now, I wouldn't blame you if you were skeptical about this conclusion, but let me acquaint you with additional evidence that makes our case stronger. And that is the evidence of the geophysical survey. So Andy Creekmore, my colleague from the University of Northern Colorado, he directs our geophysical project. And it turned out that magnetometry was the most effective method to use for geophysics. So happily, when surveying the site with a magnetometer, we could see the evidence of architecture under the surface over a very large area. So here's the high mound. This is the presumed city wall, the edge of the site. So this is just up to 2014, Andy had surveyed 48 hectares, so like almost half of the site. These, by the way, are modern electrical towers. Who pay no attention to them. So what we find is what looks like a dense occupation, which, judging from the surface collections and from the excavations, must be Middle Bronze Age. And it's pretty homogeneous. You know, it doesn't look like different periods are stuck together. It all looks of a piece. So this ought to be the latest Middle Bronze occupation on the lower town. Now, you might notice up here an interesting looking feature, and if we get closer, here it is. So it's pretty, I think, pretty obviously the city wall with towers. So we couldn't see it with our excavation, but curiously, the magnetometer can see it. So that's an interesting phenomenon that we have with our fieldwork here, that the magnetometer sees more than you can with the naked eye when you're excavating. So we've learned that the city really was a large Middle Bronze city surrounded by a wall. And there again, you see where the wall is. Then with more recent, in our 2017 field season, we continued our geophysical survey toward the southeastern part of the site. And again, you could see the evidence of the city wall. So maybe you can just tell, you can see the little towers here, every 20 meters. These towers are intervals of every 20 meters. But what also attracted our attention in 2017, as you might imagine, is this feature here. What is this? It's a big building. So I compared it to other architectural features known from the Middle Bronze Age. And, oops, I can't see. Oops, yeah, I'm sorry. Something is in, oh, well, it's just an arrow pointing to it. Here we have a close-up. What is this building? Well, if you compare it to other known buildings, it's pretty obviously a temple. So here's the temple excavated at Tel Rima, and it's got a square courtyard in the middle. It's got a cella and an antecella, so the sanctuary against one wall. This is a ziggurat, which we don't have evidence of. But we've got what looks like an antecella and a cella here and a large courtyard. But our building has two courtyards. So our building is like twice the size of the Tel Rima temple. So here, comparing it to other temples, here's our building. Here's the temple at Ashur, which was founded by Shamshi-Adad. It's the temple to the god Ashur at the city of Ashur. And it's a similar situation with, with a large square courtyard with the antecella and cella, presumably. But again, it only has one, well, I guess you could say it's got, it depends on how you interpret this. But there are similarities between our building and the Ashur building. And in Rima, and then down in southern Mesopotamia, at Larsa, the temple of the sun god, the temple called Babar, it's got two large courtyards and also two rows of small rooms around the courtyards, like we have at Kurd Qaburstan. So the building at Larsa is bigger than ours. Our building is similar in size to Ashur, I suppose. So we discovered that we've had this big temple in the southeast part of the site. So of course, in the waning days of the season, I quickly sunk a few trenches in there to see what we could find. Well, again, it's on the lower town. Can't see the mud brick walls very easily. You can see there's burning, so burned bricks in here. So maybe there's hope. And a few objects, a figurine and a bronze chisel, I guess. And the pottery is all Middle Bronze Age, so it confirms the date. So I'm even wondering, Shamshi-Adad, he built this new temple at Ashur. It's proposed that the temple at Tel Rima also was the work of Shamshi-Adad. And I wonder if that could be the case here too, after having subjugated Kurd Qaburstan. Did Shamshi-Adad build a temple here? And it might account for the way that this building is oriented differently from the other architecture. Obviously, it's somewhat speculative. So we have what I like to call a 21st century problem, where the geophysical results give us all this information about the ancient site, but the excavations have problems, seeing the same things with the naked eye. And we have to work on this in the future if we can go back. Turning to the pottery, many parallels to Middle Bronze pottery at sites like Tel Brak, Tel Leilan, Mari, less so at Ashur, which is interesting since Ashur is much closer, the well-known Khaburware of the Middle Bronze Age. Our two carbon-14 dates from the High Mound Burn area center around 1800. So the pottery and the carbon-14 dates both give an indication of sort of Middle Bronze II, so-called, but early Middle Bronze II. So allow me to point out that Middle Bronze evidence, like Late Bronze, is rare on the Erbil Plain. So we're learning all this stuff is new about what's going on the Erbil Plain. Well, let me very quickly insert just a quick reference to one more period of occupation. When we were digging on the High Mound, the southern slope, we encountered a number of graves that were intrusive. And these graves had no objects in them. And like, what kind of, who are these people that have no objects buried with them, not even pottery? But one of the graves turned out to have objects. Here's one of the object-less graves. One of the graves had objects. And this was a clue to the period of this cemetery. So here are some of the objects: a fibula, a bronze coal applicators, stamp seals. So here, a Neo-Babylonian stamp seal inscribed with the name of Basia, a personal name, with a bearded figure in front of these cultic symbols, ostensibly. And then an Achaemenid Persian royal style cylinder seal with the Achaemenid hero figure. So apparently this cemetery is Achaemenid in date, if we can use this one well-furnished grave. And I'm curious, like, what is it? What's going on? That the mortuary practices seem to have changed. That most people are buried without any objects at all, but one woman is buried with many objects. All right, so returning to our original research questions and wrapping up what we've done, what have we learned so far? Well, we're starting to learn about North Mesopotamian urbanism in the Middle Bronze and Late Bronze era. The hollow cities model does not apply to our Middle Bronze Age city. It's densely occupied, it's congested, it's not hollow at all. The heterarchy model, I don't know yet. We have a temple, there doesn't seem to be any palace near it, so that could support this idea of separated bases of power, but we need more evidence, obviously. Regeneration, likewise, we need more evidence, but we're learning more and more about the organization and the character of this city. Is it Qabra? Of course, I'd like it if it were. So far, the evidence seems pretty supportive. It's a very large Middle Bronze Age city, a walled city with evidence of some sort of trouble around 1800 BC or so. Even, if you compare the wall of Qabra, the city wall of Qabra on the Dadusha Stela, and compare it to our city wall, it's got these towers at regular intervals like this wall does. Of course, that's probably true of any city wall in the Middle Bronze Age, so it's nothing, not conclusive. But I don't know, the temple certainly is indicative of like some sort of large scale activity and large-scale resources available. So that's yet another sort of tempting situation that we've got. And then, of course, what do we do next? Well, I don't expect to be able to dig this summer, given the COVID situation, not to mention recent troubles with rocket attacks in Erbil by some kind of Shiite militant group. But if we can go back in 2022, as I hope, I certainly would like to continue the geophysical survey, to explore the temple in greater detail, to explore the large-scale building on the high mound, and to continue our exploration of other parts of the site. So I'd like to finish by acknowledging the hard work of my team over the several seasons, the support and encouragement of our colleagues in the Department of Antiquities in Kurdistan, and the funding agencies that have supported the project as well. And I thank you, of course, for your attention.
Thank you very much. It was extremely interesting. So thank you so much for your presentation. This final part, as I mentioned at the beginning of the live stream, is dedicated to questions, to comments. Therefore, if you do have questions, please use the live chat of YouTube, and I will read your questions to our speaker. So in the meantime, while we are waiting for some questions in the live chat, since for the moment we don't have, oh, well, it's just arrived question. Great. Thanks for the great presentation. Could those clay figurines in the LBA grave be connected to a conjuration ritual of some kind?
A conjuration ritual. So maybe a kind of apotropaic ritual, something like that, where you ward off evil.
Possible?
Yeah. Indeed, we know, of course, that clay figurines were used in apotropaic rituals in ancient Mesopotamia. And so, there are texts that describe how to make them and what to do with them and so forth. So that could well be a possibility, but why they would be in a grave needs explanation. The people in the grave are dead. So if they wanted to ward off, perhaps they wanted to ward off evil in the afterlife, I suppose that's possible. Or are these figurines, or do they represent the actual people whose bones are in the grave? Because there are multiple individuals represented. But I don't know. I don't have a good answer to explain the figurines, and I would be very happy if other people had suggestions.
Thank you so much. And again, concerning these figurines, but not only these figurines, were there some pieces of evidence concerning funerary rituals performed in the area?
Okay, so we have well, as you saw, we have graves from the Achaemenid period, we have graves from the late bronze, and we have graves from the middle bronze. So the Achaemenid period, I found that very interesting. If my dating is correct, then you have one relatively rich grave, and then the rest of the graves have no objects in them. Now, recently at the ASOR meeting, Petra Creamer gave a paper reviewing the evidence for grave goods in the Neo-Assyrian period in northern Mesopotamia, and she concluded that the graves of the elite were very rich, but the graves of the non-elite got poorer and poorer. And she had various reasons to propose for that. And maybe the Achaemenid situation is a continuation of that now, either because the mortuary beliefs had changed, or that people, Petra Kramer proposed that actually not only people just became themselves, they were in an economic bad situation and they became poorer and poorer. So I think that's one aspect that's interesting of the Achaemenid cemetery. Then the late bronze, you have these, these pits with children or adults and pottery and other objects. So it's kind of predictable, what you're finding there. What was not predictable were these 4 big figurines. And I'm still trying to understand them. There is this phenomenon of what are called the stone spirits in the 2nd millennium in Syria and Mesopotamia. So stone figurines that are understood to represent ancestors. And perhaps something like that is involved here, but of course they're not stone, they're clay. And then the Middle Bronze Age, we have several graves. And here what's interesting is that the bones are found inside a very large barrel-shaped ceramic vessel. So it's the kind of vessel that's well known in southern Mesopotamia, sometimes called a burial jar. So it's interesting to me that they're using the same practices that are found in southern Mesopotamia in the Middle Bronze Age, way up in the north. So those are some observations that we've made.
Thanks a lot. Really interesting. Thank you so much. We have another question in the chat from Daniele of the Land of Nineveh Archaeological Project. Hi, Glenn. Great talk. Thank you. Could the reason why you can't see the bricks of the city wall be that it was built as a rampart with a proper wall sitting on the top of it?
Yeah. Hi, Daniele. Nice to hear from you. Yes, it could well be that the city wall was not made of mud bricks, or that what still exists is only of earth, so a kind of mud rampart, and that the mud bricks on top don't survive anymore. It's true, or that they only survive in a very vestigial way that the that the geophysical, the magnetometer could observe. However, we have the same problem with other parts of the lower town where one would expect mud brick architecture, and you don't see anything. You don't see anything in the section. You don't see anything horizontally, and I would if you said, oh, you're just not looking hard enough, or you haven't cleaned it well enough or something, I would agree with you, but we tried our best. We put water, we sprayed water on it, and surely if you cut through a mud brick wall, ordinarily you can see in the section what you've cut through, and you don't see anything here. So it's a peculiar problem. Now, it's been observed by other scholars. So Tony Wilkinson also has discussed this, and how the idea that in some parts of northern Mesopotamia, the mud bricks in the upper meter or two below the surface, the mud bricks become they become mixed together and homogeneous with the rest of the soil, and you can't see them. So he calls them ghost walls. And at Nuzi also, the excavations at Nuzi, they had that problem. So it's not unique to Kurd Qaburstan, but it is a problem. But unfortunately, we had it all the way down to virgin soil on the lower town. It isn't just the top 1 meter or even 2 meters, it's 3 meters. So we have to figure out a way to solve that problem.
Thank you so much. Actually, I've got another question. Again, concerning the human remains. So again, the funerary aspect. Did you happen to analyze the human remains from an anthropological and paleopathological point of view?
Yes, there was a kind of, I'd say, preliminary analysis of the human remains, but you know, not to the extent, I don't think, like details about paleopathology we still would need to do. But yeah, particularly well, yes, we did. I don't remember anything unusual. That they're just, you know, it's a mix of adults and children and
yes,
male and female.
There's nothing particularly or weird concerning the typology. It's quite common. I mean, women, children, and men. Okay.
Yeah, we didn't notice. Of course, the number of burials from the Middle Bronze and Late Bronze is small. I know maybe 4 from the Late Bronze and 2 or 3 from the Middle Bronze. So it's not of a large sample. The Achaemenid burials, that is a larger sample. But of course, since there were no objects with them, we can't observe interesting patterns with respect to gender or age or anything like that, except for the fact that the rich grave was a grave of an adult woman. That I can say.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, I'm looking at the chat. It seems we don't have any more questions. So I really would like to thank you once more for your time, your presentation. Oh, I'm sorry, a question just arrived. So if you agree, I would ask this question as well. From Stefano Valentini. Thank you for the lecture. It is possible that the walls were built in Pisé, a mixture of clay and straw that filled a wooden support structure like a formwork.
Yes, I considered the possibility that they could be Pisé. Pisé has been identified elsewhere in Kurdistan, in sites in higher up in the highlands, in the Suleymaniye area. And so, yeah, I was thinking that maybe that is the situation. But I think that if it was even if it was Pisé, you should still be able to see that in the section, right? It would be, I think, easy. I've never excavated Pisé before, so it's possible that I'm making mistakes. But I would think that you could see it, if not in the if not horizontally, then vertically, and we don't. When I was talking to Christine Kapinski, who excavated the site of Kunara in the Suleymaniye region where they had Pisé, and I asked her, how did you identify it? And she said, because they built Pisé on top of stone, and when they hit the stone, they realized that there was a wall there, and then there was more Pisé underneath the stone. But of course, we don't have stone in this case.
Thank you. Okay, now it really seems we don't have any more questions. So again, thank you so much for your presentation and your lecture. And I would like to thank our public as well. Thank you so much, everyone. And our next lecture would be next week on Wednesday, as usual. So March the 3rd at 5 p.m. Italy time. Salima Ikram will discuss a new embalming deposit found by the South Assisive Conservation Project. So thank you so much again, and see you next week. Bye.
Bye, everyone.